Hello and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. I'm so excited for my guest today, Jason Fellows. Today our topic is Cambo, and Jason runs Tribal Detox, which is one of the most comprehensive Cambo practitioner training schools in the world. And by the time this podcast releases, I would be in the training or I would have just completed his training. We talk about what Kambo is. It is from the secretions of a giant waxy tree frog from the Amazon jungle, and it is filled with bioactive peptides that bring the body back to homeostasis, and it works with the body and the mind. Today, we talk about our sessions with Kambo, what they look like, what to expect, how you'll feel afterwards. We really unpack this topic from beginning to end and how to know if you're getting this medicine safely. I'm so excited that I'll be doing this training so I can share it with the world. It is literally like somebody hits the reset button on your body after you do Cambo. It is absolutely legal. It's not a psychedelic. It's not an easy medicine to take because it makes you feel awful when you're taking it, but is absolutely worth it because of the benefits that come afterwards. And a session only lasts 20 minutes. I hope you'll gain some beautiful insights from this episode. Please, if you're enjoying them, give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. And even more gratitude if you can give us a comment or leave a review. I hope you'll enjoy today's episode, and I want to thank you so much for being here today. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast, a place to explore possibility through mindfulness, movement, and self-discovery. Our intention is to deliver insight and inspiration while fostering conversations that are genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human. We hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi, Jason. Good morning, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast.
Good morning. Thank you.
I am so excited to chat with you today about Cambo. And I feel like we scheduled this a couple of months ago. I'm really excited for so many reasons because I think that this is such a powerful medicine. And then also I'm doing your training in January.
Exciting.
Yeah. So for people that have no idea what Cambo is, could you explain a little bit about it?
Yeah. So Kambo, it's the short answer is it's a secretion from an Amazonian tree frog known as the phyllomedusa bicolor tree frog. This secretion that we're talking about is rich in bioactive peptides. Bioactive peptides and neuropeptides. You know, we've heard a lot about peptides, and they've gotten pretty popular in the media in terms of certain autoimmune issues, performance enhancement, skincare. Like peptides are being used for so many things these days. But a lot of these peptides derive from the secretions of certain amphibians. So this particular secretion, rich in its bioactive peptides, it's kind of just multifaceted as far as their functions and what they can do. But essentially, a peptide is a signaling molecule, a little chemical messenger that instructs the cells of the body how to behave, how to function properly. And we create over 7,000 peptides endogenously in our own body. They're the little mechanics of the body that keep everything in balance or in homeostasis. So the peptide structure in Cambo, or in the secretion of, this Cambo, a lot of it's very similar to the peptide structure in our own bodies. So when it comes into the body, our bodies know what to do with it. It's not a foreign agent. I mean, it's a foreign agent, but it's familiar, right?
Yeah.
So our bodies know what to do with it. And, it's not like there's a single ingredient in Cambo that heals the body. I like to think of it as Cambo teaching the body to remember how to heal itself. Because again, they're just little signaling molecules come in, send their signals, move the cells of the body back into homeostasis. And that's what a lot of people, why we feel so good following a Cambo session, is a lot of times this is just due to us being out of balance, right? So, there's a lot of things as we come into adulthood, we've we've lived our years of life. We've taken pharmaceutical medications. We've endured trauma. We've endured illnesses, diseases, infections. Like, it's all part of the human experience. But as we suffer some of these things, depending on the trauma, depending on the disease, even aging could be considered a disease because it's just brain-body function marked by the loss of cellular efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just the natural evolution of the body. And what can happen is, due to some of these causes, these peptides can become confused, start sending mixed signals, right? The body's out of balance. So this is when we start noticing the little aches and pains just that we seem to develop overnight from sleeping. This is when we start to notice the weird bouts of depression coming up out of nowhere, or anxiety. This is when we start noticing maybe certain autoimmune diseases, like the immune system's not firing as well, our digestive system is getting sluggish, we're getting old.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this is due to peptide insufficiency, or the peptides being out of balance in the body. So when we introduce Cambo, this crazy little secretion from this little frog in the Amazon jungle, when we introduce this into the body recognizes it. Again, it's familiar. And then the peptides in Cambo start sending their signals to the cells of the body on how to perform properly, or how to function properly. And this is why, following a Cambo session, we just feel good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lot of people will say, man, following that Cambo session, I just felt superhuman. And I'll say, no, you didn't. I said, you felt human. This is how we're
Felt normal.
supposed to feel like. It's just our bodies and psyches have been in a state of chaos for so long that we've forgotten what humans supposed to feel like. We've just kind of gotten familiar with feeling bad. So when we feel good, it's really noticeable. And in a nutshell, essentially, that's what Cambo is.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so for people that use it, is there a protocol to use it once a month, or what is the protocol for Cambo?
It's really subjective to the individual. The
Mm-hmm.
thing is, and that's why Cambo is so unique in terms of medicine, because it really is dealing with the issues that are very subjective to what's going on in your body,
Mm-hmm.
right? For some people, it's going to be pain management. There's peptides that are attached to the opioid receptors in the body that are up to 40 times more potent than morphine. So you get the relief of pain just without the addictive high.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're needing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are going to come to Cambo because of autoimmune issues, like where we've seen crazy success with Cambo. It's specifically Lyme. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
way Cambo knocks out Lyme, and I've seen people go from wheelchair bound to traveling, teaching, kung fu,
Wow.
dancing, like just complete comebacks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about the peptides in Cambo. Even though you can find research peptides out there on the market, usually they're just a single peptide
Yeah.
that's meant for a single function. But with Cambo, many peptides in one concoction, right? So you're targeting many different functions of the body at one time with one Cambo session.
Yeah.
So that's why it really works kind of to where the person needs the attention, whether it's depression, whether it's, psychological elements, whether it's physical elements, whether it's disease related. Cambo's going to function particularly to that, whatever's going on within that person. Now, as far as the protocol, because it's so subjective to the individual, you can't really have a protocol around Cambo.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of, the first session's always, it's a low dose session. It's
Mm-hmm.
just seeing how you and Cambo get along,
Yeah.
right? Seeing how you tolerate it, seeing how you recover from it. And then once we have that first session, right, and we see how we recover from that and we see how we benefit from that, then we can start to sit with Cambo when it's needed. You know, we have to be very careful because even though Cambo appears to have a lot of medicinal properties where people really medicinally benefit from it, we're
Yeah.
not medical practitioners. We don't diagnose anything. We don't treat anything. Basically, we provide an experience, right? For some people, that experience is going to be spiritual. For some people, they're going to see other benefit as far as maybe psychological benefit or as far as medicinal benefit. So once we start seeing how we're benefiting from Cambo, then we can start to come up with a regimen of how often to sit with Cambo. And the thing about it is once you start to get familiar with the Cambo energy, it will speak to you.
Yeah.
You'll just know when it's time to sit again. You know, it'll be kind of a love-hate feeling because you'll be like,
Yeah.
it's time, but I know it'll be good for me.
Yeah.
So,
So having said that, can it be overused?
yes, it can be overused. But it is a rare type of person that's going to,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
I've never had a client that's
Yeah.
come to me and says, "Man, I just can't stop thinking about my next chemo session."
That's
You know, like it's a bit of workup to get there. Now then, I've seen where people will overuse in terms of, say they've gotten a diagnosis of herpes or something like this, right? Because Cambo's been very beneficial in helping the herpes virus go dormant. But people will want to hit it too aggressively, right? And they'll sit with a lot of sessions really close to basically just torturing themselves, thinking that more is better. The thing is, if you overuse it or if you go too hard, because it is an intense experience on the body, right? And if your body isn't quite strong enough or you're going too hard for what the body's accustomed to, then it can actually have contradictory effects. Our philosophy with Cambo or any medicine that we work with is you're going to go further by cultivating the relationship with it, right? Usually that starts slow at the lower doses, right? Understanding your tolerance level, finding a manageable dose that doesn't just lay you out, but that you can sit with, be present with, and that you can still benefit from. And as you get familiar with it and comfortable with that Cambo energy at the lower doses, you're just going to naturally go up from there, right? As your body gets stronger, you're going to know what you're able to sit with, or your facilitator is going to understand your tolerance, and they're going to kind of be able to feather you into that Cambo experience so that it's always manageable, always controlled, and not really overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the process and the procedure for it, because I think for people that are completely unfamiliar, I know I've had 3 experiences and they've all been vastly different. And the person that administered it to me said, she could do the same amount of ports or openings on different days and use the exact same amount and have completely different outcomes. And so let's talk a little bit about, if I were to come to you, what would that look like and how would that session unfold between us?
So, if you're going to come sit with me as a client, first thing, we're just going to get a good understanding of why you're even wanting to sit with Cambo. Is this for physical reasons? Is it for psychological reasons, such as depression or anxiety, right? And the more I know about you and what you're dealing with, or why you want to sit with Cambo, then the more I can get an understanding of how I'm going to basically organize that session, give me an idea of dosage that I'm going to go after. Now, let's say you're somebody that has severe Lyme and you're
Mhm.
just wanting to put strength back into the body. Well, then the first session, we use a term we call minimum effective dose. We're only going to give you just enough that your body can handle without it being overwhelming. And then that first one is just to see how you and Cambo get along. Give me a good understanding of your tolerance. So
Mhm.
let's say that you show up to me as you are. There's nothing really weak in your body. You have a pretty strong constitution in your body. Let's say maybe it's just some psychological issues. You're dealing with a little depression or something like that. But you're fairly healthy, fairly fit. I'm probably going to burn anywhere from 3 to 5 gates for a first-time session, right?
Mhm.
Now then, let's say we're going on the 3 side.
Mhm.
You're new, maybe you're a little bit anxious, right? You're a little nervous, which is perfectly normal with Cambo. I don't want to scare you off
Yeah.
by going too big the first time.
Yeah.
So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to have you drink a little bit of water, right?
Mhm.
About a half a liter of water. And then I'm just going to apply a single gate. Let's say we burn 3. And when I say burn, it's not a deep burn or anything like that.
Mhm.
It's more of just a blister. We're just
Mhm.
taking off the top 2
Mhm.
layers of skin.
It actually doesn't hurt at all.
No, it's just a little stick.
Yeah.
Little
Yeah.
stick. hmm And so we open those gates, we remove that skin, and then I have you drink about a half liter of water. I'll explain that in a moment.
Mhm.
And I just apply 1 dot, right?
Mhm.
Now, because this is your first session, all we're going to do is sit with what we call a test dot for
Yeah.
5 minutes. And this is just, again, giving me an understanding of your tolerance, how you're going to sit with Cambo. And
Mhm.
then after I monitor that test dot for about 5 minutes, then that's going to tell me if I'm going to put on the other 2 dots we
Mhm.
planned on. If it hits you really strong, maybe I only put on 1 more dot. If it hits you really light, maybe I burn an extra gate and put
Mhm.
on an additional dot, right? So that first test dot's going to give me a good understanding of your tolerance so that I know how much Cambo to apply afterwards. Now, as far as what to expect when the Cambo goes on, once we apply that test dot, within about 30 to 90 seconds, you're going to get a nice warm flush over your entire body. Most people enjoy the first few minutes of Cambo.
Mhm.
Kind of feels like you're stepping from a cool room into a hot sauna where you're going to start the face, the neck, and it's going to kind of run down your body. From there, your heart rate's going to speed up. Most of us have a resting heart rate of about 55 to 65 beats per minute. That's going to climb upwards between 90 and 130, which
Mhm.
feel like a lot, but really it's moderate exercise. You
Mhm.
stop up, run out to your car real quick, and come back. It'd be about similar.
Mhm.
But it can feel a little anxiety-inducing because
Yes.
it's coming up from a sitting position.
Yeah.
It's where we say this is where it's important to focus on your breath. Your breath is your seatbelt.
Mhm.
And that heart rate typically only stays elevated for about 1 to 2 minutes, and
Mhm.
then it comes down. Due to the vasodilation effects in Cambo, you may feel a pressure increase in your head. It can feel similar to the onset of a migraine or a really bad headache, just
Mhm.
without the headache. So you feel that pressure start to build, and then it falls off.
Mhm.
Probably feel your heartbeat in your ears. Sometimes you'll get a little electrical buzzing sensation through the ears. Sometimes the lip and tongue will go numb and tingly. Sometimes the extremities will go numb and tingly.
Mhm.
Due to an overstimulation of the nervous system, it's possible to go into little bouts of tetany. You know what tetany is? It can happen.
Yeah, but explain that for people because I think if you haven't experienced it and you do, it's scary.
Yeah, it can happen with certain types of breath work, like
Mhm.
holotropic breath work. It can happen in Cambo, again, just kind of overstimulation of the nervous system. But it's where the hands can kind of come crab-like, right? Almost
Mhm.
like a cramp in the hands. And it's not a seizure or anything like that. And usually if you just don't worry about trying to straighten them out, just keep breathing through it, and they'll typically relax in about 3 to 5 minutes. So
Which
you may
probably
think,
feels like an eternity, 35 minutes.
yeah, it can feel like a long time,
Yeah.
but that's almost also where the trust issue
Yeah.
comes in with
Yeah.
Cambo and just surrendering to the experience. But you could feel some of those symptoms or all of those symptoms just from the test point, right?
Mhm.
Then we put on the rest of the Cambo. I tell people don't panic. It's not going to be 2 or 3 more dots multiplied by the strength of that first dot. Most of that intensity is on the initial onset of the peptides coming in
Oh,
from the.
interesting. I didn't know that. So
Mhm.
most of it you're gonna get from that first dot?
Yeah, so you're going to get those intense symptoms for
Yeah.
about 5 minutes, and it's going to start to come down. We apply the rest of the Cambo. You're going to have it come up again, maybe slightly more intense,
Yeah.
and then it's going to drop back down to baseline. And then it's actually going to drop below baseline. So when it drops below baseline, your heart rate's going to slow down, your blood
Mhm.
pressure is going to drop, and you're going to have about a 10 to 15-minute Cambo flu, to where you're just going to be achy, you're going to be nauseous, you may or may not purge, you may or may not need to go to the bathroom, but you're just going
Mhm.
to feel like shit for about 10 to
Yeah.
15
That's
minutes.
exactly what it feels like.
Yeah, yeah,
Like the worst feeling ever.
yeah. And the nausea is the worst. There's just
Mhm.
something about that Cambo nausea. And, there's a lot of misconceptions about the Cambo purge. A lot of people think that you can't benefit from Cambo unless you purge,
Mhm.
and that's just not accurate. It's thought of as a cleanse or a
Yeah.
detox, but really all the healing in Cambo comes from the bioactive peptides found in Cambo, meaning
Mhm.
purge or not, Cambo is going to do its job. Um, Now it doesn't mean that you can't have an incredible psychological or even spiritual release on that purge. I've had them, and it can be a profound moment,
Yeah.
but still not necessary to acquire the physical benefits
Mhm.
from Cambo, right? It's just the pharmacological effect of the Cambo being in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, first of all, it's 20 minutes long. So why is it 20 minutes long? And then let's talk about um if it's too much or at 20 minutes we wipe the medicine off. What do we expect once the medicine's off?
Yeah, so the reason we leave it on for 20 minutes, at about 12 minutes into that session, you're starting to peak, right? That's when you're kind of at the height of the flu.
Mhm.
You're usually either purging or purged by now, or you're on the toilet, right? Like you're at the height of
Mhm.
your discomfort in camp. It's why we don't call it frog poison, because it gives off the misconception that you've been poisoned, and that's
Yeah.
why you're feeling these things. Or some people will think that the benefit from Cambo is due to hormesis, right? Introducing a poison to the immune system, and the immune system, creating the antibodies to fight it off or learning how to fight it off. That's not actually what's going on. It's more of kind of a hard reboot of the body, right? So it's like, the analogy I make is when the computer's acting up, you start getting that rainbow wheel of death that you just can't get to go away. And then you drive down that power button, you hold it down, the screen goes black, completely shuts off. Then when you let it up, what happens? Well, the computer reboots, and then
Yeah.
you start seeing all the little programs start to open up on the screen and function properly again. And this is kind of what's going on with Cambo, is you are exercising every system of the body at once: the nervous system, the digestive system, the immune system. Like everything is firing at once. You have smooth muscle contraction in the intestinal tract, the complete digestive tract. You have vasodilation. You have all the organs starting to release their secretions. Like everything's happening at once, which can make the body feel a little bit funky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is really what the flu-like symptoms are coming from. It's not from being poisoned, it's from the whole body being rebooted and coming online
Yeah.
all at the same time. Um, so, you know, that's going to peak at about 12 minutes in, and you're going to hang at that peak usually from about 12 to 15 minutes.
Mm.
After that 15-minute mark, most of the time, you're starting to slowly come off the backside, right? From minutes
Yeah.
15 to 20, you're not out of the woods yet, right? But it's not getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
Like the nausea is probably either starting to subside. You're usually starting to end your purging by now. Usually you're starting to get really cold from the blood pressure drop. And the flu-like symptoms are just slowly starting to subside. And then you're kind of moving into this very almost sleepy, euphoric state
Mm-hmm.
where you're just going to crash hard for
Yeah.
about the next 20 minutes. But the thing is once we're coming off that backside, right?
Yeah.
Once it's starting to slowly subside, what that's telling us is that we're no longer drawing on the Cambo. The peptides are no longer sending their signals, right? Everything's been sent, everything's been exercised, and now the body's starting to slowly come back into homeostasis. So
Yeah.
we leave it on for a few more minutes just to make sure we've drawn all the Cambo that we can from those dots. And then we go ahead and wipe it at 20, just so the client can go ahead and lay down, rest, take a nap, and just start. And it's typically about 15 to 30 minutes recovery, right? To where you still might be a little bit queasy, still might be a little bit purgy,
Yeah.
but you're really kind of moving into this euphoric state. And once you realize that you're coming out of it, it's almost like a celebration.
Yeah, you made it.
You made it, you just kind of lie back,
Uh-huh.
close your eyes, and bask in the victory of what you just did.
Yeah. I think all the times I've done it, I kept saying in my head, just 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. I
Yeah,
can do this.
yeah. And it can be a long 20 minutes.
It could be a long 20 minutes. Yes.
But
Yes.
I rarely heard anybody afterwards go, man, I wish I hadn't have done that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I have to say both times, the last two times I did it, once the dots were wiped, I got probably for 5 to 10 minutes both times, I got massive, massive lower abdominal cramping.
Mm-hmm.
That was super intense, had me doubled over, and it was after the dots were wiped, so it was a little confusing for me.
It can happen sometimes. Sometimes, a lot of times, the purge will happen as
Yeah.
soon as the dots come off.
Yep, that happened
And
too.
it's almost like sometimes we can just psychologically try to hold on,
Yeah.
for 20 minutes. And it's like when the dots come off is when we finally give our body permission to let
Yeah.
and do whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes also around a woman's cycle,
Mhm.
if she's on her period, you can still sit with Cambo, but you can have incredibly intense uterine cramping.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, it
But
was
a lot of things there's tools for that as well. Usually we'll get like a heating pad or one of those hot water bladders,
Oh,
you
yeah.
kettle water into, and keeping that between the thighs a lot of times will help that cramping subside.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes it can get pretty intense.
Yeah. So I've been hearing about 3 and 3. Can you talk about that and why somebody would do that?
So there's what's known as the 3-day consecutive. There's several uh coined things in Cambo. Like some people will say 3 under the new moon is like the vaccine of the forest. Some people will say a 3 by 3, 3 and 3 hours is an initiation. Like there's several things that are kind of upset around it.
Okay.
Now, where we use the 3 by 3s, right? There's a 3-day consecutive or there's a 3 and 3 hours. Now, the 3-day consecutive is we'll use this when somebody's really wanting to do some deep work. Like I had this client, he was a former football player, played for the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL. Once he left the game, he started to have a lot of problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this, the thing about concussions, when you've suffered so many concussions, a lot of people think of it as just brain damage affecting the psyche, or brain function or things like that. What they don't understand is that disruption in brain function can also cause problems in the rest of the body. And for him, he developed a severe autoimmune issue, which was, it was just like one of the most horrible cases of psoriasis that you could see on a human being.
Hmm.
It was to the point like he had to wear a hospital gown for clothes because his skin couldn't tolerate clothes.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't able to really sleep, because he couldn't lay in one place. Like his doctors told him that they couldn't do anything for him. His NFL doctors told him, there's nothing we can do for you. This is
Wow.
just something you're going to have to learn to live with. He said after that last doctor told him that, he went and sat in his car, prayed and said, all right, Lord, I'm ready for you to take me home.
Hmm.
Like he just didn't have any quality of life anymore.
Yeah.
But his wife had found a woman named Sharon Cron, who has a K6 wellness clinic in Dallas, Texas. And so they decided to go the holistic route. And then Sharon Cron had actually contracted me out to work with some of her special clients, right, that she would bring to her house on the weekend, and we'd serve them Cambo. Because that actually helped her with Cambo. She was having problems with her liver enzymes, and Cambo put her liver enzymes back in balance. So then once she understood what Cambo was, she started using it in her clinic. And so with someone like Solomon, who was suffering from this issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sharon introduced him to me, and then we did the first session just to see how he could sit with it. And he ended up only being able to sit with about 2 dots.
Mm-hmm.
He actually got a tremendous amount of benefit for those 2 dots. So then we decided we wanted to do deep work, which takes us to the 3 sessions in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think it's about 2 to 4 weeks later, we did the 3 sessions in 3 days, and usually you're strengthening the body from one day to the next. So we'll increase it by 1 to 2 dots each session. So basically you're kind of saturating the body with Cambo over a 3-day period.
Yeah.
It's like deep work, right? So in cases like that, something we do like a 3-day, wait 2 weeks, do another 3-day, and then usually go to like a 4 to 6 month maintenance dose. Like that's what we did for Solomon, and within 3 months, Solomon was back to how he was before he played the game.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, just complete recovery. Now, the 3 sessions in 3 hours, this is incredibly deep Cambo work. Like something I'll say to our students is there's a lot of people that will sit with the Cambo session many times, but there are very few people that will ever experience the essence of what Cambo truly is and what it
Mm-hmm.
can truly do until they've sat with something like a 3 by 3.
Yeah.
So essentially what this is 3 Cambo sessions within 3 hours, increasing the dosage by 2 dots. Now, this shouldn't
Well,
be someone's first
yeah.
session,
Yeah.
and this is not typically for like physical illnesses. This is mostly psychological,
Yeah.
right? And the thing about it, if your 3 by 3 is going to be a 4-6-8, meaning 4 dots the first session,
Wow.
6 the second session, and then 8 dots the
Oh
third.
my God, 8 dots. Okay.
But the thing about it is when the Cambo comes into the body, the cell receptors knows what it is. It freely opens up to the Cambo. It's like your peptides, short chain amino acids. You're essentially the same thing we are, right? The building
Yeah.
block protein. Come on in. So the Cambo comes in, does its thing, right? And the first session's going to feel just what you would expect a 4-dot session to feel like.
Yeah.
Now, in the second session, essentially you get 40 minutes of rest, right? So 20 minutes of Cambo, 40 minutes of rest, and then the second session, 6 dots. Now, typically here, it's still going to feel like a moderate strength Cambo session, but instead of coming on within 30 to 90 seconds, it could be 3 to 5 minutes before you even begin to feel the flush, right? The
Okay.
cell receptors are starting to shut down to the Cambo. You actually get to feel it real time as it's happening in your body for what it's like for the cell receptors to start shutting down to the Cambo because it's tough. So 3 to 5 minutes, still going to feel like Cambo, right? 40 minutes of rest. And then we put on the last one, so 8 dots, right?
Yeah.
Now then, this is where it starts to get a little bit interesting, right? Because whereas the second session, it probably came on in about 3 to 5 minutes. In this third session, you might not feel that flush until 10 minutes into that session with 8 dots of Cambo on you. And then it's not going to feel like Cambo, right? Because there's a couple of things that are happening here. One, you have the cell receptors starting to shut down to the Cambo, right? So those strong physical signals are not still being sent. And the other thing is because you've gone through this process 3 times really close together, the body, psyche is getting familiar with what Cambo is, right? And it's like, oh, I know what this is. We've been here, right?
Yeah.
So usually, when you do the one-off session, it's a very physical experience because it's those physical sensations that are front and center, right
Yeah.
here. That's all you focus on. But once you get to that third session of 3x3, your psyche starts to go, I know what this is, and it'll take that discomfort and compartmentalize it, and it'll throw it back here somewhere. It's still there. It's just not the forefront of your attention. And then when you're not focused on the discomfort, that's when it makes room for the psychological or even spiritual experiences to come center.
Yeah.
And I've had, I'm not making a comparison when I say this. I just want people to understand the power of it. Is I've had people tell me that third session of a 3x3 was more powerful than any medicine experience that they've ever sat with. Ayahuasca, bufo, you know what I mean? It's not going to be like that for every person,
Right.
but it's that 3x3 where you really get to see just power of what
Yeah.
Cambo is.
So I have to ask you, are we going to do that in our training?
Are-
We are? Oh my God. I started thinking last night about the training. I started getting really scared.
It sounds intimidating.
Yeah.
It ends up being one of everybody's most favorite experience here.
Wow.
And typically, of the 3x3, the first session is typically the most difficult.
Yeah.
Usually, physically gets easier after that.
So just knowing that helps you get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is even though we're adding more Cambo, we have to.
Yeah.
Because cell receptors are shutting down to it. That's why there's a delay before you feel those symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And then it's, it changes from physical discomfort to it'll sound like an oxymoron, but it'll turn into a type of Cambo bliss.
Yeah. Yeah, the last one I had, I'm not sure if it was because my nervous system had calmed down knowing what to expect, or I was in a different space, or I don't think my ports were as big, or maybe as much medicine was put in. But I had that. I mean, I had the nausea and all of that, but I had that spiritual kind of experience where I was able to surrender into it and not fight against it. And there was a lot more ease. But I haven't had 8
Yeah,
dots yet.
it's really just the acceptance of it.
Yeah.
It's like jumping in a cold showers. You can tense up soon as you embrace it, as
Mhm.
soon as you just allow it to happen,
Yeah.
right? And then that's when the whole experience changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about how Cambo is found, like where it's found. And I remember you talking in another podcast about how people are cutting it with other things. I think you said yucca and egg white, and
Mhm.
how some of the frogs are getting milked too much. And so let's talk about the dangers of somebody getting it on the internet and doing a self-application, because I think my first experience was with a practitioner who didn't know what she was doing, didn't do it correctly. I think it was my first experience. She did 7 on my spine,
Oh, wow, that's a big one.
and we were so incredibly far from any bathroom. And I did have to go to the bathroom, and I just was walking through the jungle, but it was so far. And then having like a real combo experience after that, I realized how that was not safe. It wasn't done safely. She did 5 of us all together. And so let's talk about the dangers of just buying it, getting it yourself, finding a practitioner that maybe doesn't even know what they're doing, or how do we find a good practitioner?
Yeah, and this is the tricky thing with Cambo because it's not illegal, but it's not regulated either.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find a Cambo stick, you can surf Cambo. Not recommended at all. People have died doing this. And Cambo is really, really, really safe when it's performed by a trained practitioner, just like a personal trainer. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be a big difference in safety from a personal trainer that has knowledge on how to teach someone to squat properly, and then the difference between a gym bro. And like say for Cambo, one of the reasons that we recommend not just serving yourself is because you don't know all the effects that can happen from a Kambo session. It's not just that you get nauseous and then you throw up, right? There are a lot of things happening in the body. Your blood pressure is going to go way up, and then your blood pressure is going to go way down. And for some people, when that blood pressure drops, it might have a hard time pumping the blood back up to your head, which is going to cause you to faint,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I'm with the client that faints due to a blood pressure drop, it's not a big deal at all, right? Because I know what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm going to remove that Cambo, put them in the recovery position, start bringing them back. They're going to be back in about 10 to 15 seconds, right? It's just another day at the Cambo office. But if you're by yourself, you don't know how you sit with Cambo, and you have that blood pressure drop, and then you go back on your back unconscious.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for someone to continue to purge while they're unconscious in Cambo.
Mm.
And if you're on your back by yourself with gravity working against you,
Yep.
you could purge and then inhale it and aspirate on your own vomit. This has happened to people,
Yeah.
right? People have died from this. A trained practitioner is going to know what to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like at the school that we teach, a big part of our school, kind of what sets our school apart from the rest, is our scenarios. It's 2 days. People love it and hate it because this is where you really get to learn how to be a practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be the most stressful 2 days of the school, right? Because what we do is there's about 20 some odd scenarios that can happen in Cambo. And if you work with Cambo long enough, you'll inevitably see all of them, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully with the exception of one, a hyponatremic scenario. what this is going to look like from the student's perspective is we set up myself or my wife, or if we have an assistant, in a Kambo chair in the floor, right? And then we have you pose up beside us as a practitioner, and then we say dots on. And all you have to do is wait for something to happen. And we make it really, really realistic. You feel like you're in Cambo.
Mm.
And the purpose of this is to make the most complicated Cambo session that you're ever going to see
Mm-hmm.
happen right here in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
So that we can talk about what went right, what went wrong, right? So by the time school's over, like, you've seen it all. You've developed the muscle memory of how to handle someone having a panic attack, how to handle someone fainting from a sitting position, or how to handle someone fainting from a standing position,
Yeah.
walking to the bathroom,
Yeah.
how to handle if someone temporarily loses their eyesight in Cambo, which
Mm-hmm.
does happen occasionally, right? The vision can just go black for 3 to 5 minutes.
Mm.
And if you're untrained
Yeah.
as a practitioner, you're
Yeah.
going to panic. You're going to freak out. And if you freak out,
They're gonna
your
freak out.
clients are going to freak
Yep.
out. And it could turn what would normally be just kind of a normal Cambo session into a traumatic experience, because
Yeah.
people won't know, like, were they in actual danger? Or was this just a side effect from Cambo that the practitioner got a little bit excited about?
Mm-hmm.
So, to answer your question, you just want to know there are things that can happen in Cambo that can be very dangerous if you're by yourself and you don't understand what you're doing. But with the trained practitioner, it's honestly not a big deal at all, because they've been trained to handle these things, to handle the things that could possibly happen in Cambo. And they're not big things. Like we said, if you're by yourself and you pass out, you go on your back and you potentially vomit, aspirate on your own vomit.
Yeah.
If you're with the practitioner, you go on your back, and within 5 seconds they have you in the recovery position. So you want to interview your practitioner. Do they know what to do? Like, just, you should be as involved with that process as you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very intimate experience between you and probably a stranger that you don't know well,
Yeah.
right? Like, I would want to know what could potentially happen in Cambo, right? Even if it's good or bad, like, I want to know everything. I want to know their level of training of what they're going to do in those situations. Do they have an emergency action plan? Have they had just like the basic training in CPR, first aid? And like, if there's a Cambo practitioner out there that hasn't spent $200 to at least be CPR certified,
Yeah.
then that tells me that safety is not their number one concern. We can get into the spiritual weeds all we want, but at the end of the day, Cambo is a physical process that can have physical consequences if
Mm-hmm.
those are not adhered to, right? So again, perfectly safe when someone's been trained, but as a client, you definitely want to do your due diligence of finding someone that has taken the time to be trained, spent the money to just do all the things necessary to keep their clients safe. But that's with any service.
Yeah.
Know what you're getting into.
And so what about you can get Cambo online, you buy it off of some site, it gets delivered. How do we know what we're getting, if it's safe?
I have a personal connection to all my sources that I receive Cambo from. My Cambo comes from the Mazan district, from the Kokama tribe. About, a couple, 2 or 3 hours outside of Iquitos. Like, I tell my practitioners, you don't have to get your Cambo from me, but you should know where it's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
and you should have a trusted connection. Like, I wouldn't just buy a Cambo stick off eBay or Etsy or something like that,
Yeah.
because once anything becomes marketable, there are going to be charlatans that are going to exploit that,
Yeah.
right? And there have been Cambo sticks found that have been cut with egg white, right?
Mhm.
That have been cut where they'll take like the juice from yucca and put it on a Cambo stick and let it dry because it gives a similar appearance once
Yeah.
it's dried. So they're taking a lot of alternative agent and mixing it with a little bit of Cambo. And depending on what that agent is that they've mixed it with, it could be very dangerous.
Mhm.
Like a lot of sometimes you'll get someone that sat with Cambo and they'll immediately have a immune response where they break out in hives, their neck and head gets really itchy, and most likely it's due to a dirty stick.
Mm.
Stick. Because there's no regulation around Cambo, you really need to know who you're working with and where your Cambo is coming from,
Yeah.
which is another reason it's not a bad idea to be affiliated with an organization, right? And that, whether you have a connection to that organization or whether you're one of their practitioners, like typically organizations are going to be working with the same people over
Yeah.
an extended period of time. So there's more of a trust basis there. Or unless you're just kind of a freelance practitioner, I guess you could say, that has your own connection, down to someone down in South America. It's just important that you know
Where it comes
where
from.
it comes from and that you're not just
Right.
buying it from a complete stranger.
Yeah, and I was reading something about how the frogs, when they get stressed out, right? And when they get stressed out, they excrete, um, what is it? What's the word I'm looking for?
The secretion.
Yeah, yes, they secrete a secretion.
Yeah.
And then that's what's scraped off. And then I heard that they mark their legs so that they're not getting over milked or something like that. How do the people there know if a frog is getting over milked? Because it gets weaker over time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now there's some, for a while, the Matsis tribe were kind of the main source for Cambo, and I know it was a few specific villages. And I'm not talking negative of anybody or any tribe, but there were some talks about how some of the frogs in these areas that were being sourced from a lot looked like they had scars from being over harvested. The
Mm,
Cambo didn't seem to be as potent. I guess let me just explain the process of how the Cambo is harvested. So
yeah.
basically, you'll go out into the forest or into the jungle, and it has to be close to a body of water because the frogs hang out in trees that are going. This is where they nest, right? This is where they breed. Um, and then they'll call. They'll make a call, kind of be like, it's almost like from the throat, just a,
Hmm.
and they'll call over and over into the jungle. And then you'll hear the frog call back. So
Hmm.
once you find where the frog is at, then they'll usually send one of the kids up the trees because they're the best tree climbers. And they'll take the frog and just toss it on their shoulder and they'll climb down with it. And I think these frogs are very, very docile, right? They're not freaked out. They don't look scared. They're not trying to run away from you. They're just going with it.
Hmm.
So they'll put the frog on their shoulder, come down. Once they come down, we'll take 4 sticks and we'll drive them into the ground like a square.
Hmm.
And then we'll take like this grass vine or string and tie it around the frog's ankles. And then we'll stretch it out very delicately, very gently into almost like a crucifix type pattern. And we'll
Hmm.
tie it kind of like in this X in between these sticks. Now, one thing that I'll say, people have seen this photo, and like it's a photo on the cover of Peter Gorman's book, Sapo and My Soul. And without understanding the process, the photo can look not so great for the
Right.
frog. The thing about what they don't understand is like the Kokama, they consider themselves protectors of the forest, right? Protectors of the jungle. And everything to them is sacred. These frogs are sacred. But this is how this particular tool is used in the jungle, right? It's a much different environment in the jungle. But they do handle it very delicately, and they consider it sacred.
Mm-hmm.
So it's stretched out into an X. From there, what they'll do is they'll massage the feet, or they'll take some grass and kind of tickle the nose, right? They're basically trying to piss the frog off or stimulate it. Once
Mm-hmm.
it's stimulated, then you're going to see the secretion start to come to the back, right?
Yeah.
Start to turn white. And from there, we have the flat sticks, right, that the secretion is transferred to. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll take like a smaller stick and they'll wipe from the hind legs and then over the back, under the belly, right, under both over and underneath the hind legs, back, belly, and then that's all they take from it. They never take from the front of the legs, or at least the people that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
They always leave enough on the frog to continue to protect itself in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually takes, from my understanding, about 3 weeks to completely regenerate the
Mm-hmm.
secretion.
How does that secretion protect the frog in the wild?
So the secretion, so where these frogs live is very high up in the jungle canopy. In this type of environment, you have a lot of pathogens, things that are, you have viruses, you have bacteria, you have protozoa, you have fungus, right? All these can be dangerous to the frog,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now you'll see there's videos that you can find on YouTube of this frog emitting its secretion, almost bathing itself like a cat. Like it
Mm-hmm.
emits the secretion and then it rubs it all over its body like a sunscreen, because peptides in that sunscreen are antibacterial,
Mm-hmm.
antiviral, antiprotozoal, antifungal, right? So basically it has all the antis in its own secretion that it needs to protect itself from those particular pathogens. What's interesting about that is the same peptides that protect the frog from those
Yeah.
pathogens are the same peptides that protect us from the same things, or
Mm-hmm.
cure us from the illnesses that those things cause, right? Now it can be used to ward off predators, but because of the nature of this frog, it doesn't have any natural predators in the jungle. That's why it's not really excited by anything. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
docile creature. But once the secretion's taken from the frog, it's transferred to the flat stick to where it's dried, and then the frog is untied and set back into the jungle,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And
No
that's
harm.
enough protection for the frog for the next 3 weeks?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And now sometimes those strings will leave little faded lines on the
Mm-hmm.
frog's ankles that take about 3 weeks to fade. So if they come across a frog that still has these lines on the ankles, then they'll leave it. They won't take from it. But the thing is, where we're at, we have about about 80 miles of jungle
Mm-hmm.
that we have access to, 73 different villages. And, when we make the call, one village will go out, get the Cambo. Next time, it'll be the next village. Next time, it'll be the next village. So it may be a few years before we even go
Yeah.
back to the same area.
And you just came back from a trip from Peru where you were out in the jungle with these frogs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So before we wrap up, I would just really like to quickly touch on the contraindications, because I think Cambo is super safe and it is super beneficial, but not people with certain conditions. So can we just touch on those really quickly? Because I think that that's super important and that's a big safety element.
You bet. So most of your contraindications are going to be things like major heart problems, due to the vasodilation effects in Cambo, meaning your blood vessels are going to be dilating or expanding. If we have major heart problems or anything like that, we're probably going to want to avoid Cambo. If we have any artificial parts, stents, coronary stents, artificial valves, anything like that, congestive heart failure, probably not going to be great with Cambo. Anything that's going to affect the vascular system, like a disease called Ehlers-Danlos, where you can have unpredictable tearing or rupturing in the blood vessels, that's going to be contraindicated with Cambo.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that causes dangerously low blood pressure, such as Addison's disease, if your blood pressure is so low that you take medication for that, you're going to be contraindicated from Cambo. Now, Cambo is great for people with high blood pressure, again, because of those vasodilation effects.
Mm-hmm.
Cambo can soften the arterial walls, bring that blood pressure down, and keep it at a manageable level without medication, right? So high blood pressure, great thing about, because it can drop that high blood pressure down to a manageable level. If someone's blood pressure is so low that they have to take medication to keep it up, then Cambo could drop it down to dangerous levels where they might not be able to get it back up. If a person has a history of stroke, they're going to be contraindicated, just potential dangers of brain lesions left behind.
Medications.
Most medications are going to be okay. If they're on it, something like Adderall, that's going to be a 7-day abstinence period on either side of Cambo.
Any ADD meds? What about antidepressants?
Antidepressants are okay. Anti-anxiety medication is okay. You still want to talk about all those things with your practitioner, but
sleep medicines, sleep medication?
Sleep medications, we prefer to have about an 18-hour period between the time the medication was taken and the time that the Cambo goes on. But most medications are going to be okay.
Okay. And what about drugs and alcohol and ayahuasca, bufo?
Yeah, the thing, like any type of hard narcotic, especially when it comes to methamphetamine, fentanyl, heroin, things of this nature, there's definitely going to be an abstinence period from. That's something that you're going to have to talk with the practitioner about, because it's going to depend on if it's chronic use, if it's recreational use, things like that. When it comes to psychedelics, Cambo can actually be very beneficial taking 1 to 3 days before the psychedelic. There are peptides in Cambo that make the blood-brain barrier temporarily more permeable for just a few days. So if you take Cambo, say, before an ayahuasca experience, it's going to enhance that ayahuasca experience because more of the dimethyltryptamine is crossing the blood-brain barrier. Now, there are certain psychedelics that you need to put a space between. For example, Cambo before bufo is fine. Following bufo, you're going to want to put a minimum of 6 weeks before your next Cambo session, because Cambo could potentially reactivate that bufo and put the person back into a bufo experience again. And depending on the reactivation will depend on the intensity.
Interesting.
Of that reactivation. I've seen people reactivate for 15 minutes. I've seen people reactivate for 2 hours. So that's
interesting.
And some people don't reactivate at all. We don't know who those people are. So that's why we put that 6-week window before.
Yeah. Jason, thank you. I love this conversation. I am super excited and terrified of the training in January.
You're going to love it. You're going to love it.
I am. I'm very, very, very called to it. It feels very much in alignment. So I'm very excited. How do people reach you? Tell us about like some of the offerings that you have.
Yeah. So primarily we teach Cambo school, right? I don't serve as much as I used to. Tribal Detox. The Tribal Detox platform is basically a Cambo training platform. We teach a 9-day Cambo school followed by a toad graduation for people that want to have that experience here in Colorado. And then Tribal Detox itself, we're located, I think, in 33 different states, I think 13 different countries. You can go to our website at tribaldetox.com And we have a practitioner database. So if you're interested in Cambo, chances are we probably have somebody close to you.
Yeah.
You can follow us at Tribal Detox on Instagram. We just put out a lot of educational just material about Cambo and plant medicine, amphibian medicine. That's what we specialize in. So
Yeah.
that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jason. I'm super excited to see you and meet you in person in January. And thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thanks, Nikki. I look forward to meeting you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Community Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I can be found at www.nikkiyoga.com, NICKYYYOGA.com. Until I see you again next week, I hope you have a beautiful day.